In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. If someone were to ask me what a sermon is for, I would tell them that a sermon is to explore how the action of God we saw in the scriptures we just heard, how the action of God that our ancestors recognized and wrote about, how in the same way that God acted among them, God is acting among us. So today as a sermon, I might ask you, what has Jesus done for you that you need to proclaim? Or how is it that you actually are afraid of being healed? Isn't it odd in this story? Jesus healed the man, and the people who lived with him were afraid because of it. Those are the sorts of questions I might ask you if I were preaching a sermon today, but I'm not preaching a sermon today. That was just filler. What I want to do today is I want to talk about the transition period we find ourselves here in the cathedral. It's important, I think, that we all find ourselves with the same messaging on the same page and know exactly what's happening as we go forward. And one of the things that I have found in my life is that if you don't give people a narrative, they'll create one. So I'm going to give you the true story and propose for you, as far as I see it, what's going to happen in the years ahead. For years now, the bishop first, and then the chair of the Board of Trustees, have spoken to me about what would happen here at the cathedral when Bishop Daniel ceased being our dean. And in particular, they talked to me about the role I would have in that transition period. And the bishop in particular asked me if I would want to be the dean of this cathedral. All of this happened for years. And it happened because Bishop Daniel's departure as our dean was no surprise to anyone. When he came here for a limited period of time. And so we all knew that it was around this time that he would be leaving. And so necessarily, of course, those in charge of leadership here began to imagine what would happen when he left. It's only because Bishop Daniel was planning to leave all along that I can stand here before you as your acting dean and not feel like I'm jumping into his chair before it's even cold. Under normal circumstances, I would feel terribly guilty about taking this position, or terribly ungrateful, because Bishop Daniel is my dear friend, and we go way back. And so it would seem to me sort of improper that I should so quickly jump into his role. But the fact is, this has been in the works for a very long time. However, as it drew close, as Bishop Daniel's departure drew close, the question had to be raised of exactly what this tradition would be like. And Bishop Dici sat me down and told me that for me, he saw three possible ways forward, which really in a way is to say for all of you, he saw two, maybe three possible ways forward. The first was that Bishop Dici said that I certainly was a very logical person to be the next dean of this cathedral, but that it was going to be, and I stand behind this 100%, that there was going to be an open search for the next dean, that there would be a normal search process, just as there would be in any search process for a cleric to lead an organization like this. And so if I wanted to be considered for that, I would have to leave the cathedral and go and take another position, for example, an interim rectorship, and then apply for the deanship so that I would be on equal footing with all the others across the world, Anglican priests, who would apply for this job. That struck me as being very foolhardy. I do not need to be the dean of this cathedral. I've been here 6 years. Next week is my 6th anniversary. I have been here 6 years and have found here this place to be a place of great possibility. And it has brought a great deal of joy, not a little irritation, a great deal of joy to my life. I do not need to be the dean here to still work and love the place. And so to go away for a year with the possibility of being the dean, but also the possibility of never working here again for the rest of my career, seemed very, very foolish indeed. The second option the bishop gave me was for me to simply leave here, and he would make me the rector of a parish. He named the parish. It would have been a great gig. But again, my heart right now is with this place. And I thought that, again, that might not be foolish, but I saw no reason to do it. And the third option the bishop gave me was that I would simply stay here, and that I would assume whatever role was deemed right by him and by the trustees. And that's what I decided to do. And the trustees asked me if I would be the acting dean while the process of the search for a new dean took place. And so, the position that I find myself in and that we find ourselves in is a position that I want. I want to be here with you. I want to be part of the life and the ministry of this cathedral, so much so that I don't need to be the dean. And so now, for a period of time, we will work together. I will be the acting dean, and you will be the acting congregation, I suspect. And we'll all act together. The role that Dean Daniel, that Bishop Daniel had in this place is different than the role that I will have and that we will have now together. He was here for 5 years, leading this place, steadily leading this place for 5 years. But now we enter into an interim period between his leadership and the leadership of the person who will be your next permanent dean. The interim period in a place like this, or in any congregation or religious institution, as far as I understand it, is for really one primary purpose, and that is to prepare the place for the next thing. It's a very future-oriented time. It's not maintenance. It's not even building, really. It's about preparing the place for the next dean and for the ministry that will happen here under the next dean. I've done this twice before. I was the interim dean at General Theological Seminary downtown, and then I was the interim dean at the Cathedral of St. John of the Wilderness in Denver, Colorado. And especially in Denver, the question became, how do we get ready to call the next dean? How do we prepare this place so that, first of all, this place will be very attractive to the next dean? And second of all, that when the next dean arrives, she will not have a huge pile of paper on her desk telling her all the things that need to be taken care of, that it will be a clean slate. What that means is that we need to identify, I think all of us together, the things here that need to be cleared out, the underbrush that needs to be cleared out for the next dean, and what needs to be shored up for the next dean, so that when she arrives or he arrives, they will find a place that is extremely congenial and ready to start a new time in its life. I've said all of this now so many times I can't tell you. I've said it to the liturgical ministers of this congregation, the congregation of St. Savior and of the cathedral at large. I've said it to the employees of the cathedral twice, and now I say it to you. And at the last meeting of the employees, someone said to me, well, if we're preparing a place for the next dean and trying to decide what the things are that we need to weed out and what the things are that we need to strengthen, what are we really doing here? I mean, you have to know what you're doing in a place to know what to keep and what to jettison, right? And someone asked me the very wise question of what I thought we were doing here in this cathedral. And here's what I said, and here's what I say to you, because I believe it's true. This cathedral really only exists for one purpose. Just one purpose. This cathedral exists for the worship of God. That is the only reason this cathedral exists. And that word worship, I want you to hear that word correctly. When I say this place exists for the worship of God, I do not believe that this place exists for liturgy. That's not what I mean at all. I mean that everything that happens in this cathedral, in one way or other, if we are doing our job, if we are being faithful to our foundation, is for the worship of God. That word worship, in the prayer book Marriage Liturgy, beginning in 1549, this is what it was the man, I'm sorry, forgive me, what the man said when he put the ring on the woman's hand. There was no giving of a ring to the man until 1979. He said, "With this ring I thee wed, and with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow." With my body I thee worship. Oddly enough, when the first American prayer book was compiled in 1789, that line disappeared. So it just had the ring and the goods and nothing about the body, because the Puritans had this terrible impact on the American culture. With my body I thee worship. And what that means is I honor you, I care for you, I treat you as worthy and worthy of my care. And I do that physically with my body. With my body I thee worship. So when I say this place exists for the worship of God, what I mean is not that this place exists for liturgy. Everything that happens here, if we are true to ourselves, must happen for one purpose only, and that is to glorify the God we know in Jesus Christ. That is what this place is for, to glorify the God we know in Jesus Christ. So as we move into this interim period, as we look at everything that happens here and ask, what are the things that we most need to keep and nurture, and what are the things we most need to let go of so that this next dean will inherit a place ready for her or for him? Everything has to be analyzed, I think, according to that question. Does this honor God? Is this true worship? And that means everything from these pride lights, which indeed I think are for the worship of God, or for the way we treat one another at the coffee hour. All of it somehow has to glorify the God that we have come to know in Jesus Christ. It all has to be for the glory of God. And that, I think, is what our task is here. So how long will this misery go on of you having to put up with me as your dean? I don't know. One of the things that we've learned during COVID, I think I've learned, is I don't know much about anything. How life rolls itself out, it is very difficult to say. It could be 6 months, it could be years, we really don't know. The exciting thing, though, for me anyway, about it not being forever, is that because we only have a limited amount of time, man, we've got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. I mean, that's the way it is. When you don't have forever, you know you've got to make the most of every single minute. And I think that's also part of our charge in this time ahead. Not to take even 1 minute for granted, but to ask ourselves with everything we do here, everything we do, every moment we do it, does this glorify God? And how can we work more to glorify God in this thing? That, I think, is our task. I think when I was thinking of what I would say to you today, I couldn't help but to think of what St. Paul said in the second letter to the Corinthians, that wonderful line. I love the line. It comes up in Advent. Now is the acceptable, no, it comes up in Lent. Now is the acceptable time, right? Now is the acceptable time. Well, I don't know if now is the acceptable time in our life, but now is the only time we've got. Now is it. Now is all we've got. And what I trust is that now, in this limited time we have, all of us in this room, all of us in the extended Cathedral community, all of you online who are with us today, all of us together in this little bit of now that we have, if we are truly faithful, can make this cathedral as ready as it could possibly be, so that when the next dean arrives, she or he will find a place fully committed to the worship and glory of God.